Hello everyone. This video is part of a series where we are developing a microservices-based social media application with the main goal of learning the microservices pattern. We also want to learn some of the main challenges that come with it, as well as some best practices and possible solutions for us to address these challenges. Here is an overview of our current and planned activities in the near future. We are working in the authentication service, and we will then move to the front-end client, Kubernetes, Kafka, and then sharing some code and implementing a dedicated notification service to send emails to our users. Here is a more detailed roadmap. You can pause the video and inspect this if you want on your own to have a better idea of what we are going to implement next. We also have a Jira board where we track the progress of our tasks. And we are currently working on sending the verification email to users once they sign up to our application. So in the previous video, we did a bit of refactoring and reorganized our files so that we can work a bit better with, or we can have a better setup to add new files to our email sender. As you will see, there will be quite a few new files here, so it's better if we have a folder structure. And in this video, we will start with implementation of our NodeMailer email API. So let's start right away. I'll create a new task, NodeMailer email API.ts, and that's not a task, it's a file. And here just a comment. So here we reach the boundary of our test-driven development approach, right? So once we start talking about testing, sending actual emails, it's not that straightforward to do that from a testing environment. And why is it so? It's because whenever we want to send an email, we need to inevitably have an internet connection, right? Or we can set up some local service, maybe local Docker container when we run that container, and that is going to have our SMTP server in our environment, and then we would run the tests being aware that that local host can be, or that local Docker container can be accessed over the network. But still, my point here is that we reach a point where we would go outside of the boundaries of our current system. So the authentication system, once it reaches out to some external entity, some external system to send the email, it becomes considerably harder to integrate this in our unit tests. And that's why we have developed some tests for our mock email API, right? So the mock email API is being used in our files here so that we can test whether the emails are being sent or whether the functions to send the emails are being called from a testing environment. And if we can ensure that these functions are being called, then we'll say, okay, then we will assume that the functions of another email API are also going to be called, and then it doesn't depend entirely on us. It also depends on the external service that is providing the functionality to send emails. And then, because we are doing such things, or because we are relying on external systems, if we were to add this to our tests or to our unit tests, these tests would acquire a very undesirable characteristic. They would become brittle, they would become flaky, right? So they would easily break, or they would be inconsistent in terms of behavior, because imagine that for some reason when I'm running the unit tests, my internet connection is down, so the test is going to fail only because I cannot reach my remote SMTP server. But the tests themselves, they actually work. So, or for some other reason, maybe the SMTP server is down, maybe the SMTP server is very slow, so it takes 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes to finish a test. So this relying on these external dependencies is something that we want to avoid in our unit tests. And that's why we created the mock email API here that we will use in our unit test environment. And that's also why we are not going to write a specific test for the NodeMailer email API. Okay, so that's why we are not starting with the unit tests here. We are starting with the actual implementation of the NodeMailer email API class. So I'll just come here to my mock email API. I'm going to copy the types that I need. right? But here I don't need to import from the utils folder. I can import from simply ./types. And I will then export, I think I export my class, right? So I export default class node mailer email API extends email sender email API, right? So now here I have a node mailer email API that has to implement the two methods that are defined in our email sender email API. If I come to this type, you see that we have two abstract methods. First one is the send sign up verification email, and the second one is to send our actual email. So I will simply copy this and I'll paste within my node mailer email API, and I will remove the abstract keyword, right? So now we are missing the body of these two functions. Let's add them here. And as you can see, it's complaining that, okay, if I'm expecting some promise here, you need to return something from the send sign up verification email and also from the send email method, because it's a void email. We don't need to return anything, but here we need to return. So let's return a new, or we can also mark this as async, and this I think would also be async. I don't remember if I think async comes after protected. Yeah, so this would be a promise of void. And why is it async? Is because we are going to make network requests, right? So here I will simply return the email API send email body. I will just, or send email response, I'll just return a new object where I'm going to have a to email of some fake email for the moment, test.com, and a status of success. Okay, so this should be enough for our node mailer email API to work correctly. Now, how do we use this node mailer email API, right? That's maybe the question that we really want to work with. We actually want to use node mailer. So node mailer is a package from Node, and I think that we can install this already. So let me save this file, and I'm going to add this, run node mailer. And if I'm not mistaken, I also need to install the types from node mailer. Oops, npm, not npm run, npm install, right? Install node mailer, but the types actually I will install in the dev dependency. So let's install node mailer in a normal dependencies, and we will install the types as a dev dependency. So npm install save dev types / node mailer. Okay, now everything is installed, and then we need to start working with our node mailer API in order to set up our SMTP server. So I was thinking, what is the best way of doing that? And if we think back to our previous video where we had the diagram that said we can have different SMTP servers as we want them. So it may be the case that we want to have a different SMTP server for development and another SMTP server for production. I think it would make sense for us to start working with, let's say, the local, right? The local SMTP server, the node mailer app SMTP server. So if I just open the node mailer app here, I already have a project on social app, and we can start a local server, right? So let's get to the point here. Let's by the end of this video, let's make sure that we are able to send at least one email. Okay, so let's make this as the goal for this video, and it's not that much additional effort. So here, whenever I create my node mailer email API, and this is not the final design, okay, this is really not the final design, but this is just for us to get the functionality working. And then in the next video, we will do a little bit of refactoring, and we will start adding some very nice structures around our code. We'll use the factory pattern to actually generate our SMTP server, and we'll see how nice that looks and how easily we can scale that once we have the pattern. But for the moment, whenever I create my node mailer email API, I would like to have this little node mailer.createtransport method. right? And what this does is, if I come back to the browser here and I will open the nodemailer.com documentation, and I just want to show you a little bit of the documentation. So in order for us to be able to send an email, we need to create what NodeMailer calls a transporter, right? So by creating an SMTP transporter, we can then use this transporter in order to send emails to our users. So this is basically telling NodeMailer something like, okay, connect to SMTP server X and use SMTP server X to send emails to our users. Now, if we don't create this transport, or if we don't create this transporter, then we have NodeMailer has no idea how to send emails to the users. We could say nodemailer.send email or something. Of course, it's not going to work because there is no such a method. But if we try to send any email with NodeMailer, it wouldn't know how it can reach the service that is actually responsible for sending the email, right? So if I come back here to the users documentation, you see that they recommend creating a transporter object, and then we can call the method sendMail from that transporter, right? So let's examine a little bit how this would work in our environment. So here I will have a private transporter, and once I have my constructor, I will say this dot transporter is going to be equal to NodeMailer, and I think that I need to import NodeMailer from NodeMailer. NodeMailer dot create transport, and I'll simply copy and paste the code here, right? So I'm just copying and pasting the code from here. That's it. And I think I need to start the server. So the server is currently stopped, and I'll come here and I start my server. So now I'm starting the local, I'm running the local SMTP server. Whatever emails I send with the NodeMailer email API, they are going to be caught by this local server. So now I have a transporter, and just for the sake of completeness, I will type this as mail because this is exactly the type that is returned from the Createtransport, right? If I hover over here, you see that it returns a mail type. And this mail type, we can even inspect this a little bit further. This mail type has a couple of methods. Where is it? Options, exactly. So the mail type, I can use it to send some emails. Let me just find it here. Exactly. Yeah, so here is this class mail extends event emitter, right? So here I have a couple of methods that I can use to verify the SMTP configuration, and the most important one to send mail, right? And we will use this method now in our application to send our first email. So once I have the constructor of this NodeMailer email API, then I assign the created transport to my private variable transporter. Then all I need to do is from within my send signup verification email, for example, I can simply say this.transporter.sendMail, and I need to pass a couple of configurations here. So the to email is going to be required, test@test.com, and the from email I could say, let's say, no reply at unsocial.app. We can also pass a subject. The subject is going to be my first email, and the text is going to be, this is our first test email, right? So nothing very fancy. I'm just sending the mail. And here I'm interested in also inspecting what is the response that comes from this send mail. So if I hover over it and I hold Command, or I think Control in Windows, and I click on this, then it brings me directly to the definition or to the declaration file for the send mail that we are using at the moment. And it tells me, okay, it returns a promise with sent message info. And here the sent message info is basically any, so it doesn't give us that much information, unfortunately. We'll need to inspect this element within our console.log, right? Let's do a console log, and then we will simply return here. We will still return the to email as we had before and the status of success. And as you can see here, I am not really making use of the send mail method, so let's do a little bit of refactoring. I will actually put the method within the send mail, and here I would like to receive some arguments, right? So I think that arguments would be these ones, and this is not allowed because my class is not implementing this. So let's come back here and I'll put this. Args is going to be an email send email API, and then I need to change also my mock test, so my mock email API. But I think that here it should be, everything should be fine. If they start complaining, then we'll see, we will adjust this if TypeScript starts complaining, right? But the arguments, it may also be empty. I think it's just an object if we don't pass anything, or if we pass an empty object. Let's pass an empty object here, and this is going to be okay, yeah, that's where it starts complaining. So now we can come back to our node mailer email API, and here I will say await this dot send mail, and here we will pass a to email, and that's going to be test@test.com. That's the only args that we need. Oops. And then we'll return this object here as the response. And for our send email, we will actually use, in the to field, we will use our arguments, right? So here, let's say this is args, and from here I can destruct the to email key and pass this to my to object, or to my to attribute, or to key of my mail options, right? So now I have a basic setup that I can use in order to send emails to my users, right? So let's give it a try to this. We will add this to our index.ts file, and we will try to send our first email. So let me come back to my index file. I will export this also, this default. Export default as node mailer email API from .node mailer email API. And within my index file, what I want to do here is I want to start my email sender, right? So before I start listening on my port, I would like to have this email sender is going to be email sender dot get instance, and then I want to activate my email sender, and then I want to set the email API to the new node mailer email API, right? So now here I think this should also be accessible via the top level export, so we can remove that and have everything under one import. I think this is cleaner. Good, let's give it a try. This is not going to send the email yet, but I want to at least make sure that the TypeScript checks are all passing and that our application is going to start. So everything seems to be passing. Let me run quickly prettier to fix everything. It's just a matter of personal preference. And now we can start our application. So now if I run npm run, and I think it's been a while that I don't run this command, start dev, exactly. So start dev. Let's give it a couple of seconds. And okay, we are not passing the .m file. Yes, so here we need to pass a config, right? Let me stop this. So this is because this is loading directly from our .env file, but we are actually working with either .env.dev or .env.production. So I apologize for that. In my path here, I'll just say .env.dev, right? And then here in my .env.example, I will change this to be a little bit more general, because now we want to allow any SMTP server to be able to be used in our application. So it's not a node mailer SMTP, it's not a mail, it's not a specifically node mailer SMTP, it's a general SMTP server, right? So if we want to define a different SMTP server for production and for development, we can definitely do that. I have them here set up in these two files, but I'm not going to open because they have some private access keys, of course. So at the moment, I will simply leave this as it is here, so that we can start our application and use this information, SMTP and SMTP public and private keys. So let's see if this is going to work. Exactly, now it's working. And in our path, we are loading the information from .env.dev. Now, this doesn't play any major role at the moment, because within our node mailer email API, we are hard coding the user and the path, right? So this would be our, let's say, public key, and this would be our private key. We are hard coding this, but this is not going to be always the case. We will very soon pass this as environment variables, so that we can use, of course, a more production-friendly approach where we don't need to commit any. Of course, I mean, it would be a very bad practice to commit keys to our repository, so we want to load them from the environment variables. But for our purposes here in this video, we're just hard coding this. This is a local host, so it's the local server, so it cannot be accessed from outside my computer. It's good enough for us. Okay, now that it's starting, let's wait a little bit here, and then we will say, okay, after you give this console.log, we will send our sign up verification email. And then here I will pass my to email, because that's a required argument. Right, this I will mark this as an async function, and then I will await whatever happens here. And let me come back here to my sign up verification email. This is from my email sender, so I need to go to the one from my email API, so from the node mailer email API. And the only thing I will do here is I will change this to also use the provided to email in our args. So it's going to be to email and the to email here, right? Like so. Okay, now it should send our first email once it restarts. And as you can see here, I have a promise of pending, right? So I probably forgot some await, exactly. Forgot this await here. So let's see now if it will print our response. Exactly. So this is our response here, and it has accepted. It has sent the email from email and to test@test.com. And now if I come to the node mailer application, then you can see that we are already sending our email. We sent it twice because we made a change and then we restart the server automatically. So now every time we make changes to the code, it will automatically restart the server and it will send an email, and we definitely don't want to do that. So I will remove this from this line here, but now you can see that we can already send actual emails from within our application. Good. This was a somewhat longer video, but I think it makes sense for us to have everything done within this video, at least the basic setup, because in the next video we will start working on our node mailer email API class and making it much more friendly to extension. If you want to get notifications every time I release a new video, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. I have a lot of plans in my mind, a lot of playlists which can be interesting for you. So make sure to subscribe and you'll get a notification as soon as I upload new videos. Yeah. So let's stop everything here and let's run a few comments in order to format our code and make sure that there are no linting issues. Give it a couple of seconds for linting. There will probably be some issues, but exactly. So there is one error, and that's just an import. Right, so these two imports should come before. Here, unexpected empty object pattern, that's in our mock email API. So here we shouldn't pass an empty object. Let's pass this as no op again. run prettier, just organize this indentation here. And let's see the linting again. Yeah, it's still complaining about the unexpected object pattern, so we can just remove the object altogether. Let's see if this will be working. Give it a couple of seconds, it's going to check everything. Exactly, so now it's gone, and we still have a node mailer email API console log statement that we by default or normally don't want. Here it was okay because we were interested in checking the results, and this will be useful for us in the future as well, because we need to get some information out of it. We maybe use this information in order to test whether sending the email was successful or not, but let's remove it in order not to have this pending ESLint warning in our backs. Good. Now for the TSC. And within the TSC check command, we are going to check if there are any broken imports, any issues with types, but everything seems to be working fine. And last but not least, our so beloved test statement, right? So let's run the test command and let's make sure that all the tests are passing before we commit our code. Everything is passing, so now we can simply check what was changed. I will add everything to Git. And I'll commit this as feed for authentication, implement node mailer email API, and send first email. Right, so this was what we did in this commit. Or yeah, we are not sending the first email here. I removed the code, but well, it's okay. At least we know that we are now ready to send emails from this code. I'm pushing this to our repository, and I will add a link to the description of this video. Okay, so until the next video, thank you very much for your time, and see you then. Bye bye.